So we've got a panel here on getting your RPG published, sharing your world, sharing your ideas. We have four excellent panelists here. Stephen Turner of Britannia Games publishes Chivalry and Sorcery, which has a new edition out late last year, early this year. And the Essence line of role-playing games. Christoffer Sevaldsen is the designer and publisher of Black Void RPG, a sort of cosmic eldritch horror that's attracting quite a lot of interest in the game market at the moment. Jared Earle of Nightfall Games has the second edition of SLA Industries, a grim, dark, and one of your colleagues described it to me as a splatterpunk game yesterday. Michael O'Brien of Chaosium, publishers of Call of Cthulhu, RuneQuest, King Arthur Pendragon, and I could keep going with that list of publications, couldn't I? BRP and various others. What we're going to talk about today is how you go about the process of getting your game published. It's commonly said that it's easier than ever at the moment to publish a game. You can publish straight to PDF. The expensive tools of the 1990s are now available for a $50 monthly subscription. You can design away to your heart's content. But there's an awful lot of people with ideas, and relatively few of them translate that into action. So first of all, why? What's actually got people inspired to do their own game? Christoffer, if we start with you.
Well, I've been working on it for probably 15, 18 years, all in all. So obviously it's a passion project. And then at some point, I was like, it just seemed like a good point in my life to really do something about this sort of boyhood dream that had been lying about for all these years. And fortunately, circumstances allowed me to actually go full throttle on it. And now with Kickstarter opportunities and so on and so forth, like you said, it's within grasp to do something like this, even though you're just one person with a dream. And so I'm living the dream, so to say.
Jared.
Let me just check I'm not muted, because that's the usual trope of...
you are not muted.
The reason to do it, was it Edmund Hillary who said, because it's there?
Yes.
You do it because you can't see... We did it in '93 when we did SLA Industries. We did it because we didn't know we couldn't or shouldn't. There was no reason not to. We were unemployed, living in Thatcher's Britain, not making much money, with literally nothing to lose, all sharing a flat on the dole. And we thought, why don't we just do this? And essentially, Dave Alsop and Anne Boylan, co-founders of Nightfall back in the 90s, they planned on just doing it. They dragged me in. And why do it? Because we thought we could actually do better than a lot of the beginners who were coming in. And we thought, well, we can, what do we know? We're three unemployed people. We can match White Wolf. That was our target. And we're still going 27 years later. So I think we did okay. But you have to do it because you want to do it. You don't do it because other people say you should. You don't do it because you think your game's okay. You do it because you really want to. And you can these days. That's the thing. You have to want to.
Mike, you had a slightly different path, I think. You got yourself published, and with the acclaimed Sun County, before you then were part of a consortium that took over Chaos and were invited to.
My story is by far not typical, but it is very similar to the idea that I wanted to do something because I thought I could do it better than was being done. And in the early 1990s, the role-playing game RuneQuest was being published by the Avalon Hill Game Company and had brought out a couple of lackluster releases. And I thought I could do better than this, and actually sent them a completely laid out, finished book and said, guys, come on, you could do better than this. And amazingly, they brought in a proper editor. They brought in Ken Ralston, who then later went on to do amazing stuff in video games. And it was something called the RuneQuest Renaissance. It was very exciting. Interestingly, I've been a Chaosium fan since I was very young, since 1979, when I first found the game RuneQuest. And I'd always wanted to be a writer for Chaosium. I think I had my first manuscript rejected by Chaosium in the late 1980s. And it was only just recently I've been published by Chaosium itself. It was
I need a copy of the RuneQuest colouring book.
the RuneQuest, the colouring book. It was Call of Cthulhu, the colouring book, was my first ever publication for Chaosium. And it doesn't really count because I'm one of the owners of the company. So, you know, there you go.
That counts.
The other really interesting thing is, and maybe this is going to come up later in the conversation, is I did the book Sun County as a work-for-hire job, which basically means you don't own the copyright, you don't own the characters, you're basically signing over all the rights to it in return for being paid, which is fair enough. It just dawned on me recently that I actually now own the copyright of Sun County and all the characters in it again, but I actually had to be part of buying the company to get that all back. So that's a fairly extreme way of doing
That's
it.
your Victor Kayam moment. I loved it so much, I bought the company.
Later in this panel, talking about work for hire versus being able to own your own work, I think would be a useful thing.
I agree with you. Steve, what's your story? What got you?
Well, after 10 years of working on my own campaign and got the opportunity to publish it as a licensed product to Highlander Designs, the then publisher of CNS 3rd edition. Shortly after we had our second product out, similar to Mike, I was in the position to do a Victor Kayam and bought the IP and going on from there. But you're never going to make a lot of money publishing, but you do get the kudos and a legacy.
I was going to come to profits a little bit later on. What you can expect, and as a little bit of a spoiler to people, don't expect a lot.
No, but it does seem to satisfy my megalomania.
So that actually brings it. So summing up, sort of what you really need to get this going is somewhere between self-confidence and Steve's megalomania. So are we all agreed with calling that a certain amount of arrogance?
I would say ego.
Yeah.
I would say passion.
Yeah. Okay, we can spin it whatever way we want on that. But
I'm okay with arrogance. The arrogance born of sheer self-confidence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the belief that you can do it better. Okay, so let's assume that you've worked out your core mechanic. Let's hope that you have one for a start, and then you're not going to go an AD&D first edition and invent a new rule mechanic for every circumstance. But you've got your core mechanic, you've got your frills, you've worked out your combat system, your interaction, you're happy with it. You've probably written it yourself because it's the first thing that people tend to do. You're going to need quite a bit more before you get published there. I often say that I can do pretty much everything involved in bringing out a role-playing game. I'm a former journalist. I know my layout. I can bodge bits of art together with computer 3D software and what have you. It's not great, but it'll do. What I can't do is all of that on one product. So talk to me about design, editing, art, layout. What sort of budget might you be looking for? What might you be looking to pay people? Where are you going to shave costs? I was going to say let's go in reverse order, and I can't remember who I started with last. But Steve, you were the last to speak. So
okay, what you need to do is look at how much you're prepared to spend for your game. What sort of look do you want to give your game? For Chivalry Sorcery, we could quite easily have saved money and gone for a more cartoon style artwork, but that wouldn't have suited the game. So if you want really good artwork to support the game, you are going to have to pay. And you set the standard of what style art you want, and you go finding artists. And if you can't afford them, you can't afford them. But there's no point in trying to stint on artwork. There's no point putting a piece of artwork every other page if it detracts from your game.
I think that's actually something that's changed since the 90s, where all of us looking now at full color. Unless you're going for an old school Renaissance style where you're deliberately, going for that art style. Chris, we seem to have moved onto the art side of it, and Black Void is really getting some credit for the art in there. Do you want to talk us through that a bit? Is that the biggest cost there?
By far. Except it's on par with printing costs, I'd say. But I mean, for me and my approach to do it was, I'm a very visual kind of guy. So I needed the game to really sort of convey all the emotions that I had about the setting. Everything started with the setting, the mechanics came later on. And I was scouring, actually before I decided to go ahead and publish it, I was scouring for artists that could sort of bring my vision to life. And I've found a lot of my artists on Instagram, for instance. Also because I wanted to get fresh young talent in there that had lines and approaches that you didn't see, in all the other great products that were out there, but something that really sort of stood out. And by sheer amazing luck, I've managed to end up with a team of incredible artists that have more than made my vision come true. They've contributed their own thing. So it's, they've really added to it. So it's sort of a collaborative vision now, not just my way of seeing things, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this. But you're right. It's about not skimping. I mean, this Black Void is a passion project of mine. So I said to myself, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. There's no cutting corners. There's no doing anything half. I mean, we're going to go full on, and if we have to spend all the money on art, that's how we're going to do it. And luckily, the Kickstarter went quite a bit over the initial goal, which meant that we could afford even more great art than I had initially planned for. And clearly, that's resonated well with everybody who's supported it, because, like you're saying, Black Void is getting a lot of kudos for the art, and I think that so the investment was definitely worth it, I would say.
Mike, you've got multiple lines, multiple art styles. Since we seem to have be discussing the artwork now, but are you finding roughly the same as Christoffer? Art and printing costs are roughly, those are your biggies?
Yeah, art's expensive, and here's a great solution for particularly people who don't have a very big budget, depending on what your theme of your game is. We publish Call of Cthulhu, and one of the core settings for that, of course, is the 1920s. And you can actually use a whole lot of public domain art very effectively that you don't have to pay for. And you can use it in your work. There are places you can find this. The US Library of Congress Prints and Photograph online catalog is a great place. The New York Public Library digital collections, the British Library on Flickr Commons. These have thousands and thousands and thousands of images, and they're photographs, maps, manuscripts, and more. And most of those actually have a search function on it where you can select public domain material that you can use royalty-free in anything. So you have no danger about, you know, using an image that you're not allowed to. And that is a fabulous way to save on your art costs in a book by using these public domain images, and they're well worth exploring. We use artists, of course, in our books, but we still use these public domain sources as well, and have found them to be extremely effective. And this is Cthulhu Dark Ages is a recent product we've done, set in the Dark Ages in the year 1000. That's got some really, really nice looking stuff that we found in the public domain, old manuscripts and things. And you would think that maybe, you know, you'd look at these full color images and go, wow, these look amazing, and they are. And because I think the original artists have been dead for 1,000 years, they're free.
Jared, art style for Slay has changed very drastically. I think, and I'm absolutely loving the Halloween Jack cover image on there. So again, you're clearly art is a major part of your budget.
I think most people would not believe us if we told them what our art budget is. Let me just say we had a £90,000 Kickstarter, and over 10% of that went on art.
Yeah.
We spend a lot on art, and that's even with one of our founders being our major in-house artist. In spite of that, we still go out of our way to find freelance art. We do spend a terrifying amount, but that is because we were founded by, I mean, I'm a failed illustrator. I went to art school and became a graphic designer, and then because I wasn't as good as the other guys in Nightfall at drawing. We went from seriously, I've got a great portfolio, and I stood it up against Dave Alsop and Stuart Beale and Brian Dugan, who were our in-house guys. And I went, I'm out. I'm going to do the book layout. How's that? And 27 years later, here I am still doing that. And we found that because we were so art driven, and we needed to make a statement like we are as good as anyone else. And we did that through the art. And you say it's evolved a lot, and it really has, but our primary artist is still the same primary artist. So the art style has evolved as a side effect of everyone just getting better at what they do over 27 years. I mean, Dave Alsop has been a professional artist since, well, I met him at Fantasy Forge when he was illustrating for their catalogs, and that was in 91. So he's been doing this since 29 years. He has got better. The other thing that happened is the printing costs dropped drastically. When I first started paying for printed books, black and white was one price, and printing in color was almost 3 or 4 times the cost. You had to run it
3 or 4 times through to get the color separation.
You still do. You still do, but the plate making is now cheaper because it's no longer done with photographic processes. Well, it is, but it's done through a digital photographic process. And it now costs, if you get a quote from a printer, it now costs the same to print in black and white as it does in color. The cost difference is that low that you don't get any savings printing in black and white. So the only initial cost is your art. And if you're worried about an initial outlay that's going to survive the cost of the book, you might as well do it in full color, because you only get to pay for the art once, whereas you pay for the printing over and over and over. And if that's a repeating cost at the same cost of black and white, why not go color? Also, these days, color art is also significantly easier to produce. Traditional art, you can't fix. Digital, not easily anyway. Digital art, you can fix, which means that the artists that are coming up today aren't learning primarily as black and white artists. They're learning as digital color artists. When Photoshop is your tool of choice, you don't do pencil work and ink work. You end up doing speed paints with slight color palettes and then learning more color, and eventually you're producing full color art. For the same time, it would take you to do a black and white fully rendered ink piece in cross-hatching and pen and ink or whatever it is you do to produce your black and white. So the revolution of color is not, not a deliberate effect. It's a side effect of the way the market has moved and the way that technology has improved the design process. Technology has given us all these tools to be able to paint cheaper, print cheaper, do the layout cheaper, and make everything look better for the same cost that you would have had to have done it in 90s. When the 90s, when photorealistic black and white art was a thing, you can now do that in the same cost printed in color.
Yeah.
So we've spoken a bit about art. Printing is the other
Yes.
big. Now, a number of conversations that I've had with people, they've been quite interested in the idea of producing the PDF and then setting it up for print on demand. You have very few upfront costs with print on demand. However, all of you have gone for professionally printed print runs. So what can you tell people? Why that choice? It's the expensive option in some ways.
Expensive upfront costs.
Yes.
Long term, you make proper profit.
Yeah.
You can't, if you want, I mean, a lot of people are doing this as a hobby, which is fine. Do your print on demand if you're hobby products. It really will get you set up and established. But once you are established, and if you want to ever make money out of it, you have to print it yourself. You have to get it professionally printed.
It's also
You want to be retail. I mean, the goal isn't to be in the shops, but it is also, you do want to be in retail. Whether or not that equates to proper increased sales by being in retailers, you need your books there if people are going there to find books.
Mike, you're nodding. Oh, sorry, Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, I've recently done a cost comparison for one of my accounting clients. 400 books on a Kickstarter. They would normally go through the print-on-demand route. The cost for doing that as compared to going to a normal printer, having a proper print run, the print-on-demand costs were 8 times higher if they weren't paid to have the 400 books done as print-on-demand. And so
Mike?
even with shipping, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So we print our stuff. We have printers we've printed in China. At the moment, we've been printing in Lithuania, which is
same as us.
another thing. Yep.
And us.
Lithuania, guys. That's your printer.
Yeah. We've been very, very happy with the printing that we've had done in Lithuania. The biggest challenge that anyone's going to have with printing is I don't think it's actually the printing process. I think it's the process of getting your product to the person who's bought it or ordered it from the printer. And that's also where the enormous costs are. One of the advantages of doing print on demand, particularly through something like Drive-Through RPG, is you can offload all of that hassle and trouble to Drive-Through RPG or One Bookshelf. So they'll take care of that for you. The other challenge that you're going to have is you've got to work out how much you're going to print, because obviously the more you print, the cost is going to come down per copy. And you've got to think, okay, if I got 1,000 backers in my Kickstarter, do I print 2,000 copies, or do I print 1,200 copies and then run out? Do I really want to have 50 boxes sitting in my garage for the next however many years? It's a real challenge. I would very much counsel somebody starting out doing this for the first time, or as more or less doing this as a hobby thing on the side. I'd really suggest doing the print on demand PDF model rather than trying to do offset printing to start with. I think you could get yourselves into a big problem. One of the challenges Chaosium's had a number of existential crises over its history, its long history since 1975. Its most recent ones, which almost led to the company collapsing, was totally misunderstanding or making a mistake with how much postage costs were going to be after something that was printed. And they rose significantly between the moment the Kickstarter had been fulfilled and the time that the product was ready to be shipped. And that nearly led to the end of the company. The last thing I'd say for that is, in the United States has something called media mail, which I believe was first established by Benjamin Franklin so that he could send books to his friends. And that enables you to send something of a certain size in a certain size package for a very, very cheap price. So we are very, very careful about making sure that our standard products will fit in a media mail box, because that will significantly reduce our mail cost of those items. Sadly, only in the United States. No other country seemed to have such a wonderful wonderful thing.
So
to piggyback off that, there is another important thing that you need to keep track of. If you're producing products in the UK or EU, you need to ensure, no matter what you do, your packaged printed book weighs less than 2 kilos.
Yeah.
Sorry, my cat's walking in front of the computer. Yeah, you need
commoner versus hench
massive. 2 kilos is a massive price jump from 1.9 kilos to 2.0. It's a very, very, it's a steep drop off a cliff. So you need to keep track of your product weight. You don't think you need to, but it's one of those things that you realize.
I found that out the hard way. Not that the core book is over too, but with the campaign book added, then all of a sudden it's higher.
Yeah, a lot higher. Yeah.
So yeah, since we've come on to distribution, let's continue along that vein. Christoffer, you managed to make a deal for your distribution. You went into partnership.
I did. It was one of those moments where you sort of think, "Wow, is this really happening?" Because I'll tell you a story. I was looking at distributors because I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that on my own. So I wanted to bring somebody in that could really take care of that part for me. And I was looking at various companies across the globe. And what happened was I sat and looked through the list of backers every day, because that's what you do. And then I noticed that one of them had @modifius.com as the email address, and I'm like, that's very interesting. And then I wrote Lloyd, as it was, and I said, "You wouldn't happen to be working at the Modifius, are you?" And he got back to me about 5 minutes later. He said, "Yes, in fact, he did." All right, very good. If I wanted to maybe do something with you guys, who should I reach out to? And then obviously it took a bit longer before the reply came, and you said that you're biting your nails and everything. And then he says, he wrote an email back saying, right to Chris, he's actually waiting for an email from you. And that's, when the jaw dropped, right? And that was that. And because they had seen what I wanted to do, and they thought it looked great, and some of the guys there obviously backed it. So we very quickly made a deal, and that's why I'm distributed by Modifius right now, and that has helped immensely. I mean, there's no doubt about it that is a huge part of the subsequent success after the Kickstarter, to actually from day one be present in the retail, as Jared mentioned as well, because you want to have your books out there, because that's where people get inspired. They look at the shelves, they see a cover they like, and that's what you do. Because just going digital, it's so cluttered, it's difficult to find, and we are all, I think, geeks that actually love dead tree versions of things. And I mean, I've published one adventure just as a PDF, and as soon as it was up on the web shops, I just got bombarded by emails like, "Is this coming in print? Is this coming in print?" Because that's what most people want. Because especially when you're known for having good art and so on. People want to sit and just sift through it and enjoy the artwork in a physical way. So yeah, Modifius, great partner to work with, and they're a big part of the success of Black and White for sure.
Steve, you've got a slightly different distribution story there,
Yeah,
because the timing of coronavirus lockdowns has caused a bit of an issue there.
Yeah, I had some considerable export experience from working at a multinational chemical company, and so with 4th edition CNS, we did the distribution ourselves, selling directly to wholesalers around the world. Recently, I looked at the situation for 5th edition, and one of my other clients was also looking at the same, and we've formed a partnership, set up our own fulfillment warehouse company so we could distribute our own products. And both have skill sets that we can bring to that. I'm brushing up on my old documentation knowledge, but it's actually proving more beneficial for us. We have full control of where we're sending the products. And yes, we're still sending a lot of product into a main fulfillment warehouse in Michigan, but it doesn't prevent us from shipping direct to retailers, consumers, and we can do that from our own warehouse. We've set up our own contracts with courier companies and with the Royal Mail. And so, as Jared was saying about the 2 kilo limit in the UK, we agreed a flat rate contract with Royal Mail for 3 kilos.
Right.
And so that gives us a lot of scope with how we distribute from our own warehouse.
So if you have the business skills and you can talk to the right people, these things are negotiable.
Yeah, if you've got a group of friends around you who have got certain skill sets in the business environment, bash them over the head and pull them in.
That's very good advice. Always, always, always leverage your friends to help. If you know somebody who knows something, ask them.
Yeah. They'll always do it for product.
So distribution costs, print costs, art costs. Before we talk about whether you expect anything for your writing or what you might pay a writer, funding. Obviously, crowdsourcing is a big thing at the moment, whether it be Kickstarter or Indiegogo. There's a couple of other sources as well. They're not actually that accessible where we are in the UAE. But I think if you have a company that's based outside the UAE, you can access those sources. Traditionally, people would try and scrape together what funds they could, because RPG companies are not necessarily the kind of things that you're going to get a startup loan for, and you're certainly not going to get a venture capitalist coming in, an angel investor. So what would you recommend? I mean, is Kickstarter or other sources of crowdfunding the way forward now?
We got a loan to start our business. In 1993, we got Prince's Trust loans, local business loans, all sorts of stuff like that. I mean, the market has changed since then. It's a lot easier now than it was then. But we went a considerable amount in debt when we had nothing to lose. I think we were originally 20-something or £30,000 in debt just for releasing SLA Industries. We didn't care because we knew we'd be all right. Or we'd lose everything and we'd go back to exactly where we were when we started, because we literally had nothing to lose.
I had the same experience with when we came on board with Chaosium in 2015. So we all had other careers. Me and my 3 business partners that came in, and I actually had just come back from living in the United Arab Emirates for 10 years. And was kind of wondering what I was going to do, and the opportunity arose. I didn't have a plan B, and I'm very lucky that I didn't need to have that plan B, because I decided to go into it all in. but I actually think as someone who's beginning in the industry, I think there are other ways. I think before you launch your great game that you want everyone to get excited about, there could be ways to build up your own reputation and name before you try and do that, so that you are known. And I hope maybe we'll get on to talking about this, and that's maybe using some of the community content platforms that exist on Drive-Thru RPG and places like that, and maybe being seen on itch.io and other things, to have it so that when your product is launched, it's not, who is this person? It's, oh, yeah, I know about their stuff. That's really cool. Oh, they've got their own game. Oh, I'm going to check that out. And I think that's a really important thing to do. I mean, I was fortunate that I actually had been first published back in 1992. My colleagues are the same. We'd been doing this for a very long time before we came into this, but we all had other careers before that. And I think that's probably not a typical path.
And you built up a reputation as well with Rising Moon Megacorp.
Yeah. That's right. Yes, that was fan publishing though. Yeah. And that existed before, gosh, when we first started doing that, we actually wrote letters to each other. Remember those guys? Yeah. But yeah, there are other ways to do that now. And I think that you have to do that. And I think there are ways for people to know who you are.
I certainly cut my teeth on writing tournaments for the Euro Gen Con that we used.
Yeah, great. That's a great example. Yeah.
Chris, how did you? Sorry, carry on, Jared. Yeah.
No. I was literally going to say the other way to do it is if you're doing a Kickstarter, the only way you have to stand out is exactly what Christoffer's doing, which is make it very visual. People have to, if you're going on Kickstarter and you're pretty new or unknown, the way you can make it stand out is good art, very, very visual stuff, because people won't read 5,000 nuanced words and go, hey, this guy can write, but they'll look at a picture and say, this looks good. And in that respect, yeah, over to you, Christoffer.
Yeah,
is essentially what I was going to ask you, because you had to build a reputation.
I did exactly the opposite of what Mike is suggesting. But there's merit to what you're saying, obviously. I just didn't have the patience for that, I guess. No, but you're right. But what I did do was I did spend a certain amount of time building sort of a following on Instagram and so on and so forth before launching the Kickstarter. So because I wanted to make sure that, you know, or at least to see if there was any sort of interest for the project before, you know, taking it to the next level. And I'd done a lot of research and I talked to other people that had done their Kickstarters and so on and so forth. And they all said, make sure you have a mailing list of this many people that you can actually send it to directly, so that, you know, now we're live. So there is at least some sort of following. So I spent at least, I think, probably a year being very dedicated to actually garnering that following and sort of showcasing that something was coming and this is what it's going to look like and so on and so forth. And I think that helped immensely. And then, yeah, you know, like you said, it has to be visual, but it also has to be something that kind of stands out. And because there's so many people that are doing Kickstarters now that it's difficult to find the jewels in there, so to say. So you want to do something that's just that little bit different from what a lot of other people are doing. On the other hand, Kickstarter, for instance, is a great marketing platform as well. I mean, that's really a good way to get your name out there. I used it in two ways. One thing was, obviously, I was hoping to get the funding to actually do this project. But on the other hand, I thought, well, if I can't even, that may sound wrong, but if I can't even get funded through Kickstarter, then clearly nobody else is interested in the project that I think is amazing. But luckily, you know, there actually were people that thought this was interesting. Yeah.
I love the way that this is segueing nicely from topic to topic as I want to discuss things. Jared, you and I have both been sort of fairly active on groups like the RPG Brain Trust, talking about marketing and how that is a crucial part with so many products around. How do you get noticed? And Michael, obviously you're VP marketing for Chaosium. So Jared, first of all, you have some very, very strong ideas on marketing from the word go. If I remember our last discussion.
I have opinions, funnily enough. Or another thing I have opinions on. See, the distribution, I have no opinions on. I'll let you guys all talk about that. You know way better than I am. But marketing, I have 2 rules. Make a good product, tell people about it. That's it. That's marketing. That is the entirety of marketing in 2 sentences. You've got to make a good product and you've got to just tell people about it. Don't be ashamed of your stuff. Don't feel like, well, it might not be that good. If you make good products, tell people. And if you tell people, make sure you're telling them about a good product. And it really is that simple. You just have to, there's no magic bullets. There's no, well, if I do this and if I do that and if I do the other. It all boils down to having a very good product you're proud of that you can stand up and say, this is as good as. And I'm looking at all the other people on this chat here, and they all have products they can hold up and say, see this? This is worth selling. And then anyone who's got any modicum of success will tell you all they did was they told people. How they tell people is, like Christoffer said, Kickstarter is a very, very good marketing tool. We would have gone Kickstarter even if we didn't need the money, because it increases your audience, it increases the people who can see and hear you. And that's all you really need when you're trying to start up. Then you get your good product and then you tell people about it. And if it's really good, other people will tell other people. So what you can also do is tell people to tell other people. That's the secret step 3 in how to get it spread around. Beyond that, there's not that much. I'm sure Mike will give you some proper better tips than that, because mine is a very broad overarching attitude to go in with. Mike's bound to have a lot more nuanced commentary. So Mike, what do you say?
It's kind of where I was going next.
Yeah, no, I think that's all very good advice. There are many places that you can be, but there are a few very important places to be. And I think you need to be on Facebook, and you can set up a page for what you're doing, so you can direct people there. You need to be on Twitter, and you probably need to be at least having people talking about what you're doing on a couple of the important forums like EN World and RPGNet, and there may be some other ones as well. But what you really want to get is you need to get some dedicated fans that are really keen to talk about your product as well, because you can talk about it and you're the creator. Or if you're not seen as the creator, you're seen as the company. So of course you have a vested interest in saying this product is the best thing, you really should buy it. But if you can have some fans that are out there saying that for you, that's the most powerful thing that you can get. The other thing that I would, yes, exactly. And I think another thing that is particularly important these days is a lot of people learn about a game by seeing the game being played. They don't necessarily want to read about it. They want to actually see it. So they want to see live play. They want to see people talking about the game or how the game works and so on. And of course, you've got to be able to do that on YouTube or on Twitch or something like this, obviously. But you want to be able to say, go and have a look at this video of how the game is played. And then when you're doing that, that's another challenge as well, because you want to have that video to be as the best video that it can possibly be as well.
That's what's holding me up. I've recently invested in some mics.
Right.
And that comes back to making a good product. When you're making your video, that should be a good product as well. And if fans are making it, that's fine. the best way to get good more fans, I'm sure everyone here will agree, is by making a good product in the first place. People like good things.
Yes.
Another thing
Carol.
that, going with the fans, if you've got a really good dedicated fan, get them to sign an NDA and give them sneak peeks of future products so they can rave about them before the release date.
We got a couple of questions in from people who are watching this. Start with the lower one first. So you can if you click the Q&A button on your Zoom, you can see the questions. But the one that I like here to start with is, how do you handle playtesting, and how do you deal with what players want deviating from what you've planned for a game? So this might, I'm not quite sure what that means. I think maybe the idea that they're trying to force your round game into a square hole, and then saying it doesn't work very well.
Well, certainly the combat system for 4th edition went through over 20 rewrites following comments back from playtest groups in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Italy, and America, as well as the UK. And you take on board all of the comments that have come in back, see which have some relevance or consistent relevance across the groups, make the rewrites, send it back out, see if they worked.
There is a side effect of playtesters that you need to be careful of. There are two types of playtesters you normally will get if you do some playtesting. One is a playtester who will come back with notes on what happened and how it happened. And those are the ones that you look at and you try to work out what you can improve. And the others are the ones who want to change the game and leave their mark on it. Some people get into playtesting so that they can try to shape a product or get their face in front of other people or get their name into the industry. You'll get a lot of these in playtesting. And you have to know how to spot them quickly so you can think, they have an agenda that I don't know or understand, and I'm just going to avoid it because everything they're saying is leading to them getting, I don't know, let's say they really like cats. So is he looking at his annoying cat over there? And they want to make sure, well, the cat people aren't strong enough. We've played a lot of it and we want cats to be more prevalent. So here are some cat mechanics that we think you should introduce. These are not playtesters. These are game designers trying to break into game design by playtesting. They're trying to sneak in through the back door. You'll get a lot of that, and that's okay. That's because some of these might actually be useful for you. I mean, I'm not saying we've ever hired anyone from playtesting, but I can see situations where that would happen. But the ones who are giving you detailed reports on where your system fails or where it slows down or where they particularly liked it, these are the ones that you keep and you nurture and you try to use them more. And when you start triaging, you keep those and get rid of others and bring new blood in until you end up with a very, very high quality bunch of playtesters that you rely on. So that's how you do it. When players give you, let's see, the question is, how do you handle playtesting? How do you deal with players deviating from what you want from a game? You ignore the ones who are trying to make you change your game too much. You have to, because you have to, again, have the confidence that you are right. I can't imagine anyone, for instance, Chaosium, Mike would say, I'm sure, if someone comes back and says Cthulhu needs more rabbits in it, because of their experience, he's not going to say, oh, maybe we should look at rabbits.
Sorry, suddenly a scenario has come to my mind. Mike, sorry.
Yeah, we look, playtesting is vitally important in what you're doing. And you have to make sure that your playtesting goes beyond just like, you know, your circle of friends who are going to pat you on the back and say, oh, this is awesome, we love it. So it is good to be able to get that out into other areas as well. But ultimately, it's your game, and you can publish it the way you want. And as we all know, everybody who plays games wants to tweak it and house rule it and things like that. And it's like, well, okay, great. After it's published, do what you want. But this is my game. This is how I've put it together. I will cheerfully take your advice or cheerfully ignore it. And I think that's the only way that you can proceed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Christoffer, you did a lot of playtesting yourself.
Yeah, I did,
At the GRC, actually.
I know, and
Yeah.
and you know, I remember the first time I had 4 wonderful players whose key goal was to tear my system apart. And they thought they succeeded. They didn't at all. But you know, having somebody come in with sort of a critical mind, but doing it for all the right reasons, that's vitally important, you know, because they want to make sure that what you do is the best that it can be. And exactly like Jared said, you learn quite quickly to figure out who those are, and those who just want to make a name for themselves, or just to troll you or criticize whatever it is you're doing because they're not doing it themselves. You know, unfortunately, you get a lot of those people as well that want to do their own game, that want to publish it, but they just can't seem to do it, so they take it out on others. But you know, take everything they say with a grain of salt. And unless, I mean, from my experience, unless I'm notified of an issue from more than at least a handful of people, it's probably not a real concern in the system if I haven't seen it myself beforehand. You know, then there needs to be consistency. It needs to be something that a lot of people see as an issue. Otherwise, it's probably only an issue for a few select individuals, and therefore not really something that the bunch is. But like Mike said, you know, once you have a game in your hand, you can house rule it all you like, and you should. And I know I've done that my entire life. So, yeah.
I found the playtesting of the CNS combat system useful in that some of the playtesters would find situations that had completely been ignored or overlooked.
Or not imagined, probably.
Yes.
Players, they always come up with the stuff that you haven't even thought of in your wildest dreams. You're like, yeah, didn't think of that.
Yeah.
Last question. What part of getting published is easier now than it was 20 or 30 years ago? And what's harder?
PDF,
I don't know.
electronic product distribution, that way.
That's easier?
You can publish anything today. If it's not, doesn't necessarily have to be in print. You have a very, very easy mechanism to be able to do so. And that certainly didn't exist 30 years ago.
What's harder? Mike, what's harder?
I think we've all talked about this, and that is the fact that it's a very crowded market out there. There are many, many games. So the challenge is, how does my game stand out? I think that's a really big challenge.
As a game consumer, it's a fantastic time to be around, but you do have to do quite a lot of the curating yourself. You've got to do a lot of the sorting out. Stephen?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that we thought about from Britannia's point of view was, if we have a new product and we've got doubts about it, put it out as a PDF first, and if the PDF runs and you sell lots of copies, then yes, it's worth looking at sending that out as a printed product.
Yeah. And what do you find harder now than it was 7th to 4th edition?
It's so much easier now. For example, printing costs. 4th edition was 3 100-page saddle-stitched black and white books. 5th edition is 600-page full-color hardback. Printing cost for 5th edition is the printing cost for 5th edition is a third of what we paid for 4th edition.
Yeah. Yeah. Jared?
I have opinions again. The difference between then and now is actually the same thing. Back then, it was much easier to be successful. You could make a living from it much easier back then, 20-something years ago. I did. Today, it's much easier to produce your own product in full color and get them printed. The difference is actually the thing that's the thing that ties them. The barrier to entry in the 90s was so much higher than it is now that you had to pass a certain quality bar before you could get into enough debt to get it printed, to get it into the shops. So the thing that makes it easy today, the lack of ease in producing a book, is what made it easier to be successful 20 something years ago. Anybody literally back then could write a book, get the book produced, get the book printed, and be in the shops and stand out. But the getting to that stage was so much harder. You could not find, there was no internet. Well, there was internet, there was no web. Well, there was web, but not until the late 90s, 2000s, before it became ADSL speed. So you couldn't discover art. You couldn't discover artists. You couldn't discover people who were writing fan fiction, live journal, the place where people really honed their craft. When we hired artists, we went to previous games artists we liked and comic artists, because we're in the UK, we have a great tradition with 2000 AD. So we just trawled that for artists, and that's how we got art. But these days, you just go on to any of the online portfolio sites and you've got thousands of artists all over the world who are willing to work at knockdown rates. Good, I mean, don't underpay your artists, but you don't have to pay for an old guy with oil paints and a 6-foot panel that he's going to have to photograph himself and all that stuff. So easier, it's much easier to produce a product. Harder, it's much harder to stand out.
Christoffer, now you have the slight disadvantage of not being
Yeah,
in
because I
publishing
didn't
20 to
publish
30
20
years
years
ago.
ago.
Yeah.
I can tell you what it was like about 2 years ago compared to today. Except for Wuhan virus, it's pretty much the same. So I don't know, but I can agree on the terms that, you know, the level of entry is much lower, but again, now it's a sea of small independent publishers and so on and so forth. So again, it's about standing out. It's about going all in. It's about living for your product in terms of doing it how you want it to be done and reflecting, you know, the quality that you want it to have. And I think that's the only way to do it properly if you want to be successful. At least that's what I'm trying to do. So, well, when we do this again in 20 years, then I'll tell you whether it succeeded or not.
I know. If we do this again in 20 years, the hair on my head might be the color of the hair on my beard. Maybe, but at least I'll have someone. I stay.
True.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Okay, so right, we've got one from your colleague Mark, Jared.
Hello, Mark.
Given the changes in the last 30 years, what is the prediction for the next 20? Since Mark's your colleague, Jared, I'll come to you last. He tricked you there.
He is the reason I did not have to have anything to say about distribution. He's the place who's good at that stuff.
Michael, what's your prediction for 20 years? I mean, at a time when we say we can't predict what's going to happen from one day to the next, give me your best long-term prognosis.
Well, I think we're in very strange and interesting times right now, aren't we? And we've just seen over this year the incredible boom in doing exactly what we're doing here, which is playing games online. Mm-hmm. And I think that's only going to increase as time goes on. And I think what game companies need to do is work out how they factor in that as a way to be involved. So for example, you can buy our game lines on Fantasy Grounds, which is a virtual tabletop, and on Roll20 and Astral Tabletop, and there are some other ones as well. And I think what you've got to start doing is when you produce your game, you should be thinking about that from the go-get, not, oh, after I've published my game, how do we put it onto Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or whatever? Start thinking about that now, because I think that's going to be a big part of the future, particularly if there's no vaccine.
I find it interesting that we were saying earlier that some people like to buy in PDF, but we all like the dead tree, and now you're talking about selling through virtual tabletops. And I have to say, I like the dead tree, but I like to have the PDF so it's portable and I can carry around the PDFs in my phone, and then I buy the same products on virtual tabletop as well. So I have them in multiple formats, which is three times the revenue coming in, you know. Christoffer.
I agree, and Black Void is coming on to Roll20 quite soon as well. It wasn't really something that I considered at the time, but with limited resources, we had to pick one, and Roll20 seemed the most popular, so that's the one we're going on first, and then we'll go on Fantasy Ground and all the other stuff later on. So that's definitely breaking new ground. Another point, which was also about what we discussed before with being on Facebook and all that stuff, Discord is really, really an important channel, at least for Black Void, because I meet a lot of people that, first of all, they're kind of surprised that I, as the creator, am on there, and I am pretty much on there 24/7, and they really enjoy, you know, getting up and close and personal with the team behind it, because that was never really an option before, you know. I mean, if you could sit and have a chat with Gary Gygax, that would be wonderful. So I think that's a really, really important channel, and I think that ties in with Mike's point about making sure to utilize, you know, the digital possibilities that are there, and to be on the forefront of those from the get-go. That's extremely important. In terms of how it's going to be in 20 years, I think the diversity that we're seeing now is definitely going to continue, but I also think at a certain point of time, we're going to probably see a bit of an inverted curve as compared to now, because right now you have so many people publishing RPGs, and great ones as well. But I think at some point it's going to be saturated. So at some point there's going to be those that sort of float to the top, and then it might sort of become a two-tier kind of thing, you know, all the independents, and then you have all this sort of more established, which is basically how it is now, but probably just on a much larger scale, I'm thinking.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, one of the trends I've seen is less quantity being carried by wholesalers now, because there is so, as Chris has said, the saturation. Retailers can't carry all of the printed product that's out there now. And so 20 years ago, you could say have Asmodee as this devium would perhaps take 300 of your products as a small independent, but now they might only take 30.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the wholesalers will start to reduce their quantities of role-playing game products, because as role-playing game companies realize that they can access their consumer base direct.
I think I've already started to see that trend. Sort of when I visited my old game shop when I was back in the UK, and what had been a room of games and second-hand bins and what have you was down to one shelf and surrounded by board games, which of course were harder to pirate.
Yeah.
Jared.
Okay, piracy I don't think is as big a problem as people want it to be.
No, I don't.
I'd rather be on a torrent site than not be on it, to be honest. I don't think I'd rather torrent sites didn't exist and people gave us all their money. But if they're going to pirate somebody, I want it to be someone good. They do.
It increases market share.
Yeah. I'm not pro piracy. I'm not coming out saying, hey, piracy, everybody. But let's face it, people will find out about your games because someone nicks it. I think
it means there's interest.
Exactly. I'd rather someone was writing about me than not. It's not a zero-sum game. Someone doesn't have to fail for us to succeed. So while there might be more smaller companies coming out, I still consider Nightfall Games to be small in spite of the fact we've got 30-year history nearly. the small ones don't have to fall by the wayside and the big ones don't have to eat them. There is going to be an expansion, I think, where there will be more games companies and the market itself will increase. How it increases is the way I've always seen technology progress is the same, only faster. Every time I've seen someone making predictions for the future on anything, they always come up with, well, we'll have this wonderful new thing that happens. Whereas the reality is the same, but faster, or the same, only higher quality. Role-playing will not, computer games are supposed to be the thing that removed role-playing from the tabletop. And that never happened. All we got is more people playing and over different methods. So it'll always be, I think, for it to be the same industry that we're in, it's always going to be people sitting around a table. Whether that table is real or not, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But the industry will change more than the hobby changes. The hobby will pretty much stay the same. And I'm saying that as someone with over 40 years. My God, when I say that, that's horrifying. I've been yeah.
I would say the hobby is becoming more mainstream, though.
Yes.
And
but it always has.
Yeah, but it's breaking out of its niche geekness.
Well, that's only because we can see it. But if you think about it, everybody goes back and says, I remember when I was a nerd playing Nintendo in my living room and everyone out there wasn't a nerd. And then you suddenly realize everybody was a nerd. The reason that the Marvel movies were made is because we won. Geeks took over the world. Everybody realized that they were that person that they thought were very few of, that there were actually lots of. So whenever anyone goes about their geek history, I was a real nerd. I used to play the Nintendo in this way. And then they turn around and think, everybody did. There is no such thing as a closeted hidden nerd anymore, because that turned out to be the norm. And with the moment the internet let us all realize, oh, we're all like that. Oh, great. And as Christoffer says, the market is diversifying more. What that means is we're getting more minorities, more people of color, more women, more everybody joining into the hobby. And all that can do, and this is the lesson that if you're starting out in making games, all that can do is increase your market base. If you think hardly any women are playing and then suddenly all these women start playing your games, you've added a good 50% to your market base. It's like there was a role-playing game that I thought came out on a Kickstarter. I'm never going to play it, but I backed it because I thought it was the Jane Austen role-playing game. I'll never play it, but I backed it because it's good. It's a different way of looking at the hobby that just makes it bigger. And the people that will play that will eventually become my customer, because they'll see that there's more to the hobby. And if I make my games appeal to more people, I will get more customers. So I think that all that's going to happen is role-playing as an industry is going to be providing a market that is pretty much everyone on the planet, hopefully. Mm-hmm. It's not a zero-sum game.
Well, that's another thing to mention, and that is the ability to have your games in other languages as well. Mm. So not just English. Role-playing games are very popular all over the world. Our games are published in various languages, and in fact, there are more Japanese women aged 17 to 35 playing Call of Cthulhu than any other demographic anywhere. Very surprised when our Japanese licensees were showing us the figures for that. It's very interesting. The game is also immensely popular in Korea, and it's recently come out in the Chinese version as well. These are all markets where people love role-playing games, and that's another thing that when you publish your game, start thinking about possibilities for other languages at the very beginning as well, because those opportunities are there. And what you can get is you might even get a fan-published version, a fan-translated version of your game. We've actually done that with a few of our things, and we've said this is an unofficial translation, but we say that's okay. If there's an official translation that comes out later, we'll change it, but that starts. We did that, for example, with our board game Khan of Khans, which I know was very popular when you played it in Kenya as well.
Yep, absolutely. We call it the Maasai game. It's all about getting cows.
We
By the way,
had a fan version of that published in Japanese before the Japanese publisher actually did it. And
there's a big field here in translating anime and manga, which is huge in the Middle East. So there's a lot of fan done Arabic translations.
Right.
I can hear somebody saying "yeah" in the background. Jared, was that you? Were you wanted to say
at one
something?
point, yes. I was saying that one of the best ways of future-proofing your game is when you get past your small group of designers that you and your pals have built this game, is to look at hiring from people that don't look or sound like you. Because if you can include them in the design process, you can increase your market by having different voices in your product.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I've noticed is when people can see themselves in a game, they'll play it.
Yeah. I think, Steve, that's one of the things that changed with this edition of Chivalry and Sorcery. Sort of the core designers, which hands up includes me, so I've worked on the game. But the core designers, we hired in people to write specialist parts of the areas that we felt we couldn't do justice. Mike, Cthulhu has the worldwide appeal. RuneQuest is popular in so much as well. You're getting in the diverse gamer. I'm not talking really just about what we call diversity in gaming at the moment, but like from around the world, different cultures. It's about the Japanese fans and the Korean.
Yeah, and I think there's potential for that for all sorts of role-playing games. I think it's something that's got universal appeal, and if you can find those fans in other places, more power to you, because that just expands your market and expands the interest.
It's something that's happening in other areas as well. I mean, sort of Netflix is carrying a number of like Korean fantasy adventure series and Chinese science fiction, and we are all getting a little bit more globalized and a little bit more able to access the content that's generated in other cultures that previously, you had to go down to a video or a DVD lending shop and say, what have you got? It's becoming easier to access it. Gentlemen, we are 15 minutes over our time.
Yeah, I noticed from the chat there's a comment to mention the fact that there's a SLA Industries game this afternoon.
There is.
And the CNS game tomorrow.
Thank you very much. You've just done part of my closing speech for me, so always like it when that happens. So we've got a number of panel discussions coming up later today. In a 3 o'clock, I think it is. You can check the agenda, but we've got games mastering tips, tricks, and insights. There's a typo on there. It's games mastering ticks, which is me going. But either that or it's some small bug. And then this evening, UAE time, we've got cartography and mapping. So GMing tips and tricks. I think I will be on that panel. We've got Guy Sklanders, the great GM, will be on that panel as well. I think cartography, we've got some excellent mappers from Pro Fantasy. Ralph Shaman is joining us. Paco Garcia will be showing us his pen and ink style, and then a woman who has become a cartography legend in the game industry, Anna Mayer, will be talking about her 3D approach to it. I'd like to thank every single one of our speakers here, Stephen, Christopher, Jared, Michael, and Omar Ismail, who has been in the back handling the admin. The GRC Virtual Con. It is our first. We'll carry on for the rest of today and tomorrow. Check the games. We do have Steve will be running Chivalry and Sorcery. Jared's colleague Mark will be running SLA Industries, and there are all kinds of other games running as well over virtual tabletops. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending, and we hope you've enjoyed the discussion.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.